Okay. So welcome again, everybody who has come in so far. My name is Ryan Jurley. I am Community Engagement Coordinator for the Musconetcong Watershed Association. And for those of you who've been to one of these before, welcome back. Happy New Year to all. And for everybody for whom this is your first time joining us,
I just did myself.
Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. So as a reminder, people coming in, make sure you're muted. We are recording here. So I just wanted to start a little bit with an overview of the Musconetcong Watershed Association. For those of you who aren't quite as familiar, we are a nonprofit organization. Our mission is protecting and improving the quality of the Musconetcong watershed and its waters for people and nature. We've been around for just over 30 years now, and a big part of that has been the designation of the Musconetcong River, or big segments of it, as National Wild and Scenic, which is the subject of this talk. But it goes beyond that, the whole stretch of the river and all the tributaries that feed into it, all the land around it. That whole watershed area is where we work. We do a combination of things to accomplish our mission: water quality monitoring, education, policy work, encouraging access to outdoor recreation, all sorts of outreach to support that. And with the new strategic plan our board of directors has adopted, we're really focusing on 4 pillars of planning, education, advocacy, and stewardship. And through those categories of efforts, we hope to continue the work that we've been known for doing and find new ways to accomplish this mission. So one such way that we do outreach is through this River Talk series. So these are monthly seminars, virtual during the winter months. Once the weather gets warmer, it stays light out later, we try to do some in-person events, many of which are at our office in Asbury. But some of those will take on the road. And so have a variety of topics, some of which are just general river interest topics. Some of them get very specific. But this year we're excited to kind of do a little bit more effort to highlight the fact that this is a federally recognized river. It is a National Wild and Scenic River. And through the River Talk series, we'll be talking a little bit more about that. So since we're virtual, just some ground rules: make sure you're muted. It is being recorded. And in a few minutes, I'm going to hand it over to Paul Kenny, the National Park Service, who will give his presentation. So feel free to enter questions and using the chat feature, which you can find clicking on the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or you can just ask your questions verbally at the end, and we'll try to have some discussion, and imagine we'll be out of here sometime between 8 and 8:30. So with that, I just want to give a quick introduction. Paul Kenny is our speaker tonight. He's a recreation planner with the National Park Service. He's been there for 21 years, and he is sort of our liaison. He's the river manager for the Musconetcong National Wild and Scenic River, and he's been in this role pretty much from the start with the Musconetcong. He was working on the study that led to our designation, which ultimately came in 2006. And he's participated in the growth and institutionalization of the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers program, which you'll see is a subset of the Wild and Scenic Rivers. And this is a really cool designation that he'll talk a lot about in the presentation. Prior to the MPS in this role, Paul was a park ranger and a recreation planner for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Paul also has a background in interpretation and is a really good feel for the NPS, National Park Service, and how all this works. He helps manage other national wild and scenic rivers in our region. So really a wealth of knowledge, and I hope if you have a question of any sort related to the presentation, please ask, because I've always been impressed with the amount of knowledge and history that he's been able to share. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paul. He'll share his screen and begin his presentation.
Well, thank you, Ryan, and thanks to the Musconetcong Watershed Association for making this available. So I think you can all see that. That's the first slide. National Park Service Partnership Wild and Scenic.
Not quite yet, Paul.
Oops. No. Okay. All right. Hang on just a second, folks. Still don't see it, Ryan?
Not yet.
Oh gosh. Okay. Okay. Well, I do have the trailer up, so can you see the trailer? No?
No, I think you're not in the share screen yet.
Okay.
You can try Alt S on your computer, the alternate key in S.
Okay.
See if that gets you there.
Nope, it doesn't. Alt S. Nope.
What happens is you press that green share screen button at the bottom.
Yeah, I did that and everything.
So Paul, if you click on the share screen, you'll see another screen pop up. Let's you choose a lot of different screens.
Yeah.
Yep. Then double click on the screen you want to share.
Can people see that?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
Sure, you've all heard this before, but it worked fine when we tested it out just 20 minutes ago. And okay, we got your screen up. So if you just open up the PowerPoint window.
Yeah, there he goes. Can you see that now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now we're moving.
You can go to the slideshow.
Yeah, it's actually covered.
Here, go back, Paul.
Yeah. Okay.
And then at the
I got it.
There you go.
All right. Okay. Oh, we still have other people to come in. So, all right. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So here we have just the opening slide of the National Park Service Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers program. This program is a subset of the National Wild and Scenic Rivers that the Park Service manages. I'll get into that a little bit more detailed later. But America's national wild and scenic rivers comprise 0.5% of the nation's river miles. So it's a pretty small number of rivers protected overall in the United States. There are about 216 rivers that are designated, with Oregon containing about 1/4 of them. So Oregon has a lot of national wild and scenic rivers, but they're found mostly flowing through federal lands: Forest Service, Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Service. And the Forest Service manages the most of any agency. And the Park Service manages 66. But of the 66 Park Service wild and scenic rivers, 18 are in this subset, Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers. So the National Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, that was actually created and enacted in 1968. And the act protects wild and scenic rivers' free-flowing condition, which means you can't dam them. It also protects water quality and enhances where possible. And it also protects outstandingly remarkable values. That's right out of the language of the statute. ORVs are the really cool things that make rivers special and that demand protection. So here we have two different management models for wild and scenic rivers. On the left are your traditional wild and scenic rivers that are federally managed. They primarily flow through federal land. They're managed as units of the Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Park Service. Okay, so they're managed by agencies. They have a superintendent or a forest manager in charge of them. They have rangers, they have law enforcement, They directly manage recreation. They can involve federal acquisition, completely under federal management and control. And depending on the kind of designation and the kind of agency, sometimes there's no fishing or hunting allowed on those wild and scenic rivers. Partnership managed wild and scenic rivers to the right primarily flow through private lands and involve local management. The Park Service is in a support role, and local zoning, state land use management protects the river. And there are no law enforcement rangers on partnership rivers. There are no federal land acquisition measures, no federal land condemnation. State and local fishing and hunting, boating rules are unchanged. And the management plan is locally developed. So partnership wild and scenic rivers, just as an aside, this is a very different model of management. It's very unusual in the federal government to be so locally oriented to make what makes these rivers special and quite frankly, I think what makes them pretty successful. General benefits of National Wild and Scenic River designation, right? Number one, national recognition. It's a prestige. It's the Hall of Fame for rivers in the United States. It also, for not-for-profits, makes grant applications more competitive. And it can, the act itself augments the Clean Water Act and its protections. And the Park Service provides support, direct staff assistance, and funding. And the act itself prevents new dam construction. And it prevents in-stream construction adverse impacts on river values. And the River Council is locally appointed. So we'll get into what the River Council is in just a few minutes. But their River Councils really help protect riverside property, which helps protect the river itself. And here we have partnership wild and scenic rivers. They're managed locally through an agreement among the local management council, environmental non-governmental organizations, and the National Park Service. So you have three elements in managing these rivers. The Park Service, you have the not-for-profit like the MWA, and then we have a council made up of chiefly municipal representatives. And a management plan developed during wild and scenic river studies guides the management of the river and describes river partner roles. So those three bodies I just mentioned, their responsibilities are actually in the management plan. And the Park Service advises the River Management Council and provides funding to implement the river management plan. I'll get into the roles more in greater depth in just a minute. But here's where the partnership wild and scenic rivers are. The Great Egg Harbor River in New Jersey was the first back in 1992. The York River in Maine and the Housatonic River in Connecticut, and I believe part of Massachusetts, that they were just added last month. And the middle of the pack around is where the Musconetcong is. That was added to the system in 2006. There is one river that's outside of the Northeast, and that's the Wekiva River in Florida. And I just found out maybe last week that two rivers are being studied in Florida, the Kissimmee and the Little Manatee River. So they're being studied for designation. And here's in the mid-Atlantic, these are the rivers that are designated wild and scenic. The rivers highlighted in gray, the Upper Delaware and the Delaware Water Gap. These rivers are managed like traditional National Park Service units. They have superintendents, they have federal land, they have federal properties. And Upper Delaware does have a river council, so it's kind of a hybrid, but the Delaware Water Gap is really very much managed like a national park. Now, the rivers highlighted in yellow are all partnership wild and scenic rivers, starting with the Lower Delaware, which is a pretty big designation at 67.3 miles. The Musconetcong, its tributary, its largest volume tributary in New Jersey, 28.5 miles, a little more than 4 miles were just added really less than a year ago. White Clay Creek down into Delaware, Pennsylvania border. That's 191 river miles. That is the largest wild and scenic designation east of Wisconsin. So that's a big designation. The Great Egg Harbor River, which is outside that purple watershed line for the Delaware River watershed, but it's still in the mid-Atlantic. The Great Egg Harbor is 129 river miles. That's a big designation. And then the Morris, the southernmost, empties out into the Delaware Bay shore. So all of those yellow rivers, all of them except one have river councils, and they're managed pretty similarly. And here's the Musconetcong River. As you can see, it kind of forms the boundaries of really 4 counties and about a dozen municipalities. Each of these municipalities has a representative on the Musconetcong River Management Council. And as I mentioned, segment C at the bottom left, that 4.3 mile segment was just added to the designation just a few months ago. And so that gives you an idea of how linear this watershed is. The watershed itself is only about 161 square miles. It's not a very big watershed, but it is the largest tributary in terms of volume to the Delaware River. So it's a pretty significant amount of water that it contributes to the Delaware. ORVs, I mentioned these when I mentioned the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. What are ORVs? ORVs are, again, outstandingly remarkable values. That's what's in the statute. These are specific valued resources that are unique, rare, or exemplary, and are identified for protection in a management plan or designation legislation. ORVs typically include cultural resources, threatened and endangered species, geologic features, recreation, and scenery. Here I have a couple of photographs. One picture on the left is an inner city program in Millville. It's called Elevate, and we get folks out to paddle the river and recreate. Recreation is an ORV on the Morris, and it's a pretty popular river, especially for fishing. To the right, you see a photograph of the Morris River Bluffs. That's the Nature Conservancy's property. It has some beautiful vistas, and that area is considered scenic, at least as an ORV in the management plan. And the bottom right, you see folks paddling. That next picture, they're folks right on the Musconetcong itself. Musconetcong Wild Scenic River ORVs. Recreation's big on this river. Fishing, paddling, birding, hiking, photography, painting. So we have active and passive recreation. Fishing, this is, in terms of angling, this is I still believe it's the trout stream that's stocked the most in the state of New Jersey. I think it gets somewhere between 15 and 25,000 trout a year stocked into it. I think that's pretty amazing. State National Water Trail recreation designations also highlight its recreational value. Scenery is an ORV. This is something that's a little different for me on this river. The other rivers I have are in the southern coastal plain of New Jersey, where everything's really, really flat. And you don't really get an appreciation of scenery as much. You kind of have to get up high to really appreciate scenery on a grander scale. And here we have protected areas around Point Mountain, Alamucci Stevens State Park, and Stevens State Parks, scenic ridge tops. You really have some really pretty remarkable scenery here in Musconetcong. And you have great cultural resources. I was surprised to find that there are 10 National Historic Register listings right along the river, and 3 National Historic Districts. So New Hampton, Asbury, Regalsville, and they have contributing elements to make them National Historic Districts. That's pretty remarkable. And this river's designation is only 28.5 miles. That's a really dense field of cultural resources that are protected and that are ORVs. And this next arrow, threatened and endangered species, I actually like the fact that this management plan protects state threatened and endangered species, not just federal. So that's kind of an important distinction. Yes, I think I have a question.
Well, I figured we would hold them till the end. I see someone's hand is raised, but
okay, all right, yeah, let's hold off questions. And then agriculture as an ORV, which is very different than a lot of wild and scenic rivers. But I know people on the council, myself included, we want to protect the way of life here in the valley as much as we can. So farm protection really matters to us, matters to the council especially, and MWA. So that is a value in the management plan. And just typical management plans of wild and scenic river values, those ORVs, goals and objectives. Management plans are directly developed by local volunteers. The roles for partner entities are identified and described. And if you remember, I mentioned that the council has certain roles to play, and Musconetcong Watershed Association has roles to play, and so does the Park Service. And in the management plans, there are alternatives developed and chosen during the study process. So everybody pretty much knows how the river is going to be managed when it becomes designated. Management plans are developed during the study, not after designation. So we have a really good idea of how this is all going to work before the river's ever designated. Of course, management plan development relies on cooperation with local and state governments. And local and state regulatory authorities are always make up a pretty good chunk of a management plan, so people can refer to them. And the Park Service has Section 7 responsibility. I'll get into that in a minute. That's an actual regulatory responsibility we have to protect the Musconetcong. I'll get into that in just a minute. So here are the enumerated plan goals. You'll find these in the management plan. I'll just go over the first couple. Encourage recreational use that's compatible with the preservation of natural cultural qualities of the river corridor while respecting private property. Preserve and protect the character of archaeological sites and historic structures, district sites, and landscapes in the river corridor. Preserve farmland and open space within the river corridor and the waters, the tributaries. So you have threatened and endangered species, floodplains protection. There's a lot in here, but they basically break down to 5 goals. And then we have management. So we have a management plan. We have goals of that management plan. How do we actually achieve those goals? Well, there's a way of arranging this that we've developed over years, and I'm going to explain how it works. But here's a good picture of the marine debris removal program at the Great Egg Harbor River in southern New Jersey. It's about 15 miles or outside of Atlantic City. We have the Great Egg Harbor estuary. Lots of marine debris has been washing into the estuary with all the rain we've had in the past 5 years. And the Great Egg Harbor Watershed Association and their council developed a program to map the debris fields and target for removal as much debris as they can get out. No one else is actually doing this. The state doesn't do it. The counties, the municipalities don't do it. So we think that's worth spending federal dollars on to help clean up that estuary. So this is probably the most important slide of tonight. If there's anything you remember, I hope you remember this, that the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers Management model is really very much like a 3-legged stool. We have a river council, that left leg, comprised of local county governments, residents. Then that middle leg of the stool, river administering NGOs like the Musconetcong Watershed Association. Their help usually comes through a cooperative agreement. And then the stool leg on the right is the Park Service. We're the river administering federal agency. So the cooperation of all 3 entities are really needed. to implement that management plan, and that is our charge by Congress to do. And here is the River Council for the Great Egg Harbor River in the shot. That's a typical council meeting. We get anywhere from 16 to 20 people participating, some from the public. We have bi-monthly scheduled meetings, just like the Musconetcong. And these meetings stimulate cooperation and coordination. They provide discussion and resolution and a resolution forum for river issues. The council coordinates implementation of the river management plan. It's independent of the Park Service and NGOs. That's really important. The local government representatives need to realize that the Park Service is not running the show here. Neither is MWA. The council is an independent body. And the councils link the NGOs and the Park Service directly to local governments. That's its main value. So we stay keyed in with the community and the issues that affect the river. And to underscore the importance of that, in each and every goal of the management plan, the Wild and Scenic River Council for the Musconetcong has a committee. So I mentioned before the recreational goal in the management plan. Well, there's a recreation committee in the council to affect and achieve that goal. And that's the same with the other goals for the management plan. They too are supported, by committees on the council as well. And here's just to highlight some of the incredible accomplishments for the Musconetcong Watershed Association in 2022. We'll have a River Watcher program that's still going strong, a Junior Ranger Angler program, a New Zealand mud snail plan and implementation work. And that New Zealand mud snail is an invasive snail found in different parts of the river. We're working very hard to see that it doesn't spread. We have a river restoration committee that's committed to getting rid of dams on the river and shoring up and stabilizing stream banks. We have a significant volunteer program and pretty good river interpretive signage. For a river that's not all that big, there's a fair amount of stuff along the river corridor to let people know about the river. In fact, here we have some river signage, a wayside dedication for the Munsee Nation of the Lenni Lenape. Took place a few years ago, right in Hackettstown. Then we have real-time water quality monitoring. This is a new development. It's really exciting. We have sensors in the river that measure things like dissolved oxygen and salinity and a couple other key water quality measures. We have program walks and talks. So we have interpretive programs. We have a school classroom program, dam removal planning specific to like the Bloomsbury Dam, for example. We have $210,000 that came in 2022, looking likely that will be the same in 2023. And in 2021, we counted $680,000 in leveraged grants coming from this partnership. And then there is a trail building and management project underway in and around the Asbury Mill and the River Resource Center. So there's a lot going on, and Musconetcong Watershed Association is involved in a lot of work improving the Wild and Scenic River. So MWA's role is to serve as the primary river partner in the execution of the cooperative agreement with the Park Service in consultation with the River Council, consistent with the management plan. So the money actually goes to MWA. MWA organizes and administers regularly scheduled River Council meetings. MWA, again, just as that list of accomplishments shows, it provides river restoration, recreation, research, and education services directly to the public. And MWA maintains direct connection to the Park Service in between River Council meetings. So I talk to folks on MWA in the organization probably once or twice a week, just going over certain things. And again, MWA receives direct funding from the Park Service. And then there's the Park Service role in all of this. We prevent river construction within the bed and banks from having adverse impacts on river values. So when something is proposed for construction in the river, the Park Service will review it. And I probably performed about 40 or 50 reviews since I've been here on the river for 20 years. So I don't perform too many, but they're important to make sure there's free flow and to keep those trout living. And the Park Service serves as a federal liaison to the local river council, right? We don't have a vote on that council, we're just the liaison. And we advise the council on river management issues. And again, we help fund river management plan implementation. We have to write an agreement and modify that agreement to add funding to it each year. And our main role is to serve in a support role. We are involved in river management plan implementation, but not from a position of authority. I pretty much consider myself kind of an augmentation to the staff at MWA and the council to get things done. So that's kind of it. I know that was kind of fast. Here's information on all the partnership wild and scenic rivers here in the Mid-Atlantic. We have the Great Egg, the Morris, the Musconetcong, and the White Clay Creek. I don't have the Lower Delaware here. I'm not sure why I don't, but those 4 listings, they're all good websites. You get a really good idea of what those councils are doing and what those not-for-profits are doing on the river. They all do really pretty amazing work and for not a lot of money. I mentioned in the beginning, those rivers that are wild and scenic in their Delaware River watershed that are managed as national parks, right? And those like the Delaware Water Gap in the Upper Delaware. But those rivers get funded probably about $3 to $4 million a year, each year for each river. And the Park Service can only provide a couple $100,000 to the MWA to do the work it does here. So you can see quite a difference in funding, but it is a partnership arrangement. So MWA is very good at leveraging the funding it gets. So I think what do you want to do now, Ryan? Do you want to?
Paul, did you want to share the video that you had mentioned?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna go up and just show a really quick video. It's a 3-minute video of wild and scenic rivers and what they entail. I'm gonna try to you guys are blocking my
all of these different interests really needed a mechanism for.
Okay. Can you folks see that?
Want to hit the full screen?
I can't because you guys are
Oh,
you guys are blocking. I can't put it to full screen.
well, that would be good right there. It's centered.
Okay, at least it's centered. All right.
When you think about rivers, you have to think about the whole landscape. And you have to think about all the communities, the people upstream, the people downstream, how they affect each other.
The wild and scenic designation really is a source of pride. It's something that we see as a point of identity, and it means that our river really is a national treasure.
The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was a big umbrella, but it took a long time for the Park Service to figure out how to use it to protect rivers where you're not going to create a federal park, or it would be inappropriate to buy or manage the private lands. How do you deal with those rivers?
Rivers flow through a patchwork of different kinds of ownership. There's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuges, the national park, but there's also a lot of private property, state conservation land, roads, all kinds of things that make it actually pretty complicated to manage a river.
Rivers cross boundaries. They're often used as a dividing line between boundaries. It can result in a fragmented way to look after a river and care for it. And what the Wild and Scenic Act does to creating the River Management Council, it creates a more holistic view of the river overall.
There are tens of thousands of people using this river for recreation and all the auxiliary businesses that are supported by anglers and paddlers. All of these different interests really needed a mechanism for working together. The Wild and Scenic designation seemed to be a really good way to do that.
I think we're seeing the return of rivers. Even our mill towns now are turning back towards the rivers and making them a centerpiece, making them an asset instead of a liability, because we need the water. We need the wildlife. We need the peace and quiet for our minds and our souls and our children.
It's relaxing. That water it's just relaxing to hear it go through there like that.
Everybody wants clean water. They want to preserve the recreational opportunities. They want to preserve the wildlife. They want to preserve the historic character. But they can't do these things alone. It's going to need to be a collaborative effort with state, federal agencies, nonprofits. A lot of the draw of Partnership Rivers is that we bring these parties together to preserve that resource and make the most of it for future generations.
Okay.
And Paul, that's just a trailer, correct? You got the full video link down there.
Yeah, the full video. I think, Alan, I think the full video is 20 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's around like 18 minutes.
18 minutes, okay. Yeah, it's much more in depth, but that just gives you an idea of what Wild and Scenic Rivers are about.
And I'll be happy to, people can see it's on the NPS website, but I'll be happy to send out a link to everybody since I have emails of everybody who signed up. So Paul, that's what you have, correct?
That's right.
So, yeah. Well, I'll just mention that, I do agree that the three-legged stool is a good analogy. I'll say that we have representation of all three legs here in attendance tonight. Obviously, you, Paul, with the National Park Service, but we also have MWA staff here and a good number of members of our board of directors. We have Richard Cotton, our board president, and Bill Levins, the secretary, as well as other board members, Cindy McGonigal, Beth Styler-Barry, and Ray Merrill. And I also see some members of the Musconetcong River Management Council, the third leg of that stool, including the board chair, Charlie Finneran. So in the spirit of the partnership arrangement we have here, if any of you from the MWA or the MRMC wanted to just add any thoughts or insights to this, feel free to unmute and do so now. Kind of give different perspectives to people. But if not, we can always go into just general Q&A.
I think I saw at least one question pop up during the talk.
Yeah, I know we had a hand raised, but it looked like a accidental.
Oh.
And so, Paul, I had a couple questions, just some that popped up to me. I've been on staff for 2 years, but certainly there's always more to learn. I saw that you had mentioned that the Park Service reviews certain proposals and prevents things from happening. So does the MPS have that sort of, I don't know if it's the right term to call it regulatory authority, but is that safe to say for the MPS? And You know, does the River Management Council have any authority of that nature?
Yeah, the River Council does not have that kind of authority. The Park Service actually does have authority to review river construction projects that could impact those ORVs, those values. So that's kind of how we approach it. And even the authority the Park Service has is not direct authority. It's prescriptive authority, meaning that whatever the agency is that permits that work, we have the responsibility really of commenting on that work. And if the work we think could adversely impact the ORVs, then ultimately we could stop that project. Usually it's pretty rare for that to happen, but it's more likely we would require modifications to the proposal and then work from there. But yeah, the Park Service does have regulatory authority. Again, it's not direct, but it is prescriptive, and it's been held up in courts, even if we don't own the land.
No, not to put you on the spot, but it sounds like you've done a number of them for the Musconetcong. Are there any good, case studies or examples that come to mind of something where you worked with the permitting agency to either reject or kind of require modifications?
There might have been not too many. There might have been a couple of, for example, I know on Lover's Run there was a cleaning project on the piers that hold up a bridge that goes across the river, and we reviewed that, and there was something a little funky about the cofferdams that were to be placed and the timing of them, and we asked the state DOT to reconsider that timing, and they did. And most of these reviews are really like fairly mundane. They're some of them are culverts, and whether you go from a 12-inch to an 18-inch culvert pipe, that sort of thing. So there isn't too much in the way of anything all that exceptional when it comes to those reviews on this river. Now, other rivers there are, but here not quite so much.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's good if there's nothing too crazy happening, but all those little things, a number of them can build up over time.
Yeah, probably the largest projects we review are the ones we actually support, which are dam removals. I actually have to review that under the Act. So of course those projects are big projects, and they're pretty complicated. They're pretty long. But in terms of review, if the state signs off on it, we look at it, and it's usually a pretty good plan. So we haven't run into any issues there.
Hey, Paul, Charlie Finneran, the chair of the Musconetcong River Management Council. I think one important aspect that the council has done recently is we brought on board DEP, which has very nicely set up for the council, for MWA with the different experts and the National Park Service, a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue where DEP knows exactly what our concerns are, where we also get an opportunity to review many of the different projects that they are overseeing. And several times we have given advice to them, and I'm speaking mainly, it was Dr. Hunt that picked up a few things, brought it to their attention, which it remediated itself rather nicely. And I think that's the important issue here. Why let something get out of hand when we can bring it along and work on it as it develops and make it changes before we get into a problem? So I think inclusiveness is a very important part of, at least with our thinking on the Musconetcong River Management Council.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Charlie. This small subset of rivers that have councils, these partnership rivers, there are only 18 of them, actually 17 of them. But in most wild and scenic rivers across the country, where there's public land and private land, there is not a council. There is no council. doesn't exist. And things happen on those rivers without the government knowing and without the landowners knowing, because they don't have a council. You know, for the councils to be involved and at least provide information to the National Park Service or to not-for-profits like MWA, that's really critical. Things get missed when people aren't looking out for the river. And that's never been a problem here on the Musconetcong. It seems your council, Charlie, is really in tune with what's going on in the river. That's a big help to protecting it.
Well, we're very fortunate. I would dare say a good portion of our members that represent their townships, a lot of people are involved with their environmental commissions.
Yeah.
A lot of our members are within their own selves pretty up to date on what the rules are and what is of interest within their townships from a scientific and environmental aspect, which I think is important, because a lot of commissions sometimes, yes, you have well-meaning, but you're not always 100% fully certified. And in our case, we got we have a pretty in-depth scientific bunch of people.
You do, yeah. Your council and even the Great Eggs Council has a lot of a number of ex-New Jersey DEP employees, for example, working in the council. Some of these folks belong to ANJEC, right? That's that Association for New Jersey Environmental Commissions. So it's really helpful to have folks like that on a council who can understand even fairly technical issues and know how to respond.
Hey, Paul, Richard Cotton from the Watershed. I just want to thank you for the presentation tonight. Very informative. And I want to thank you for your continued and long support for us at the Musconetcong. And as Charlie said, it's great to have a lot of people connected to such a wonderful resource. And I really appreciate your help and your enthusiasm for our river.
Yeah, well, thank you, Richard. It's been a privilege for 20 years to work in a role that's really pretty much behind the scenes. But MWA has been a great partner, fantastic partner. And the Musconetcong River Management Council has also been a great partner. So look forward to more years.
Definitely.
Now, Paul, how did the River Management Council idea come about, and why are there some partnership rivers that don't have it and some that do?
Well, there's during a study process, folks have to want a council. Now on the Morris River, which is the only river the only partnership river that doesn't have a council, there's only one of them. So that's the Morris River down in South Jersey. For whatever reason, and it's not really spelled out in their management plan, they didn't really think a council was necessary. So it was just the Park Service and at first the county government. And then the county government didn't really want to be involved. So we selected a not-for-profit like the MWA. They're called Citizens United to Protect the Morris, and a great not-for-profit. And we've been working with them ever since. So that's kind of by default. We work with an NGO there only, but again, they didn't want a council, and it's not for the Park Service to tell them they need one. That's something they need to decide, and they decided during the study process not to have one.
So it really, and most commonly you see it with the council.
Yeah, and councils, by the way, are independent of the Park Service, independent of MWA. For example, the Great Egg Harbor River Council didn't want a New Jersey DEP representative on their council. I pushed very hard to see that happen, and they voted against it. So, you know, and the Musconetcong River Management Council, I thought, was pretty wise in having a DEP representative, but that's what they chose, and that's how it works. Tom, I think I see your hand.
Indeed. Thank you, Paul. Again, for folks, I'm Tom DeLessio. I'm Executive Director of the Musconetcong Watershed Association. Thank you again, Paul. I echo Richard's comments. how helpful you've been to me in the last 7 months since I started at MWA, and obviously the partnerships are going forward. I'm wondering if you might be able to talk a bit about what you see as the opportunities and the challenges that our organization and others may have in the future, given that there's a new Congress and that there is divided government among the two political parties. What are the opportunities and what are the challenges that you can identify?
Well, I don't want to overstate either opportunities or challenges, because in my experience on this river, it really doesn't seem to matter which party is in control of the House or the Senate, or we seem to get really good support from Republicans. We always have, and not just on this river, other rivers as well, partly because, Tom, the whole management model is locally focused, right? This is not a Washington top-down kind of management model, the kinds I described earlier in the presentation. This is all locally driven. And I know, the congressman who designated this river, Scott Garrett, was a relatively conservative congressman who just loved the river. And he loved the idea that we're not telling everybody what to do, at least from the federal government standpoint. So on the Republican side of the aisle, they really like this local management model, and on the Democratic side of the aisle, they also like the local river management model. So maybe all politics is local is really true, because that seems to be the going thing, and it's not a lot of money. It's a lot. I think, in my opinion, I think the not-for-profits are not provided enough funding. I would like to see more go to not-for-profits. I'm not in control of that, of course, but when rivers that are about the same size get 15 times the funding that one of our local partnership rivers gets, you have to wonder, like, hey, what about us? But you guys do a wonderful job with the funding you get, and you leverage it and get more funding from other sources. Congress likes to hear that. Both parties like to hear that. So that's kind of my answer to the question. It really doesn't matter which Congress is in play and what party is in control. Over time, it seems like both parties end up liking us. We have very strong support in New Jersey from Republicans, the Republican Party in general. It's a different, maybe it's different from other states, but we've had good luck on both sides of the aisle and good support.
Paul, you mentioned luck. I think in this case, in our case at least, between the MWA, yourself, and the council, and the members of the council being as gung-ho as they are and as active as they are, we allow everyone to freely have a discourse or have a word, and that was our thinking behind having DEP come in, and as a voting member, not just as a observer, because Alan made a very good point that let them be part of our discussion, and as being part of that discussion, let them take their own stake. Because once you take a stake in something, you do kind of have to back that up to a degree. And our talks never really got down to out and out, back and forth bickering. We always seemed to catch ourselves before it became antagonistic. And basically, when we spread out what we were looking for, what we were looking to improve, or what we were looking to protect, we all basically wound up on the same side of the issues. It was just a matter maybe of some procedural, maybe the way everybody's ground rules were, but all in all, when it played out, we were pretty much pushing everybody along, and I say pushing, driving everybody along, including the people that you might have thought were going to take a different role. So I think in that sense, by having people know what they're talking about, be an expert, you do if you follow environmental common sense, if you will. We've seemed to work out pretty good and pretty active.
Yeah, and we've gotten some good results out of contacting New Jersey DEP and opening up dialogue with them. I think it's better to have people around and in meetings to have discussions with instead of not. And you know, if they need to be a part of the dialogue, even if it's uncomfortable from time to time, it still needs to be discussed. And they need to, you know, those representatives from DEP need to feel welcomed. And on your council, they are, and they're valued. And I think folks on the call, in the meeting, need to realize that New Jersey's very different in that the state itself regulates the Clean Water Act. Okay, not many states do that. It's a state assumption of Clean Water Act authority. So the state, by its nature, DEP has an outsized role in protecting waterways in the state. I talked to folks in New England. Massachusetts doesn't do this. Connecticut doesn't do this. Maine doesn't do it. Really, only I think Alan may check me on this, but I think maybe Oregon. It's only a couple states that actually do this, where the state assumes authority for Clean Water Act enforcement. So they're a big player. You know, the short is they're a big player, and we want them in the arena. We want them in the stadium. You know, that's my feeling on it. So that's echoing your thought, Charlie.
So, oh, go ahead, Charlie, if you had something to add.
I was just going to add, I think we're very fortunate, again, with the members of the council, with their knowledge, along with the MWA, over the years, they've developed a knowledge base of personnel. And I look at Alan and the other members there over years have really can actually review some of these projects and not only review the projects, but apply those projects to standing law. That is a pretty important asset in the sense that we can now go back and you said this, but over here, this applies. And many times it's not that they're against something, it's that something was overlooked.
Yes.
And so we act as a team where if someone overlooks something, and that's kind of the way we like to look at things, as an overlook where we can remind you, and as long as that after you're reminded the proper action is taken, then case is resolved. You don't have that bumping heads all the time. You did this, you did that, or you didn't do this. And so I credit again our personnel, MWA, and the members of the Musconetcong River Management Council, and also Paul, your support in your position. A lot of times you certainly got us moving with the pipeline going from the oil company. That took a long time, but that would have never been done if it had not been for you reaching out and never giving up, and other things that Alan's done over the years and that the MWA has done over the years. So it's definitely a team effort. It's definitely we put on a unified front, if you will, that we're not going away, that these issues are important, and it's worked.
Yeah.
I have one question that came in from the chat, and speaking of the chat, I just want to point out, in case people didn't see, Alan did post the link to the River Connections video in the chat. So if anybody's curious about that, you can click the link that he sent out and kind of bookmark it for later. But I want to bring up this question from Robbie Lynn to Paul's attention. Can you share more about the cultural subcommittee of the council? Maybe what they do in general, or anything any specific instances of ways they've been involved?
Yeah, usually not too involved with the National Register listings per se, but they tend to take up projects that they think will enhance the story of the river, and they'll for example, we had a cultural resources committee member really spearhead an effort to get a wayside interpretation wayside on Daniel Morgan, who was born very close to the Musconetcong River and went on to be a great general in the American Revolution. So there's a wayside, I think it's pretty close to Route 57, that describes Daniel Morgan's role in the Revolution and lets folks know where he was born. There's also another wayside describing a kiln, limestone kiln near the river. There's also a wayside, I think I showed the slide with the Lenape folks from Ontario visiting Hackettstown. So we do have all of those came out of the Cultural Resources Committee. And, there has been an effort to get registered a church along the Musconetcong. I think Alan could talk about that a little bit more than me. So they do take up causes and go through with trying to get those places recognized. So it's an interesting group, and you have really a lot of cultural resources along this river. So I'm glad that we've had those projects come and pursued through a successful conclusion.
Paul, maybe let Tom DeLessio from the MWA talk about their project with the Asbury, with the different businesses or different homes in Asbury, which they're connecting to the mill, and which also affords more parking and also is bringing the people the residents as bringing them into the project. So we're just out with outreach.
Sure.
Thank you, Charlie, for that. Well, as Ryan had indicated, the board of directors has approved a new strategic plan, and one of the 4 pillars of that is planning. And the central idea there is that we should use our scientific and planning and policy knowledge and experiences to actually move the trajectory to address climate change and other issues that we see, not only affecting the water and the river, but also within the watershed itself. So one of those is we will develop a vision plan, and we'll obviously be working with the MRMC and with our communities on that. But a component of that is that Together North Jersey, which was created as a consortium of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Transportation Agency in Northern New Jersey, as well as Rutgers, came out with a request for proposals for folks who might be interested in technical assistance to create vibrant places. So MWA applied on behalf of the village of Asbury, and we're thrilled that Charlie Finneran and the MRMC endorsed that effort, as did Warren County Planning Office, as did Paul Muir and Bethlehem Township, to actually look at our village of Asbury and how to make it a more vibrant place. It'll be the first, and we've successfully received that technical assistance grant, so we're now working with them. It'll be the first time that this organization has actually worked in a rural area, and our whole pitch was that the village of Asbury is a lot like other villages and hamlets in northwestern New Jersey, and that in fact, with the lessons we learned from this, we will be able to apply to others. But a central component of that is in previous vibrant places, they've looked at roads as the transportation route. And we've pointed out to them that we not only have roads, but we also have the river. And we also have hiking trails. And that we actually have a number of ways to move people around. And that in fact, our river is an easier way to navigate than actually our roads and our sidewalks in Asbury are. So we can learn some lessons from what we do in the river and how we actually treat stream bank restoration, et cetera. And so the whole idea is that we're actually having technical assistance put together for us, recommendations on how to make the village more vibrant, how people can move from one end of the village to the other, how in particular we can utilize our sidewalks, our streets, our river access, et cetera. And we're also asking the Department of Community Affairs to do a market analysis of Asbury to be able to tell us where there are opportunities for additional recreation, possibly for economic development, possibly for more housing, possibly for more open space. And again, thinking a bit about are the market conditions and where are the opportunities? And we could use this information then and share that with MRMC as well as others. And again, this is all within the guise of, this is more information we can share within our watershed and help put together our vision plan, which will be a stitching together of the river plan, as well as county plans, local plans, the Highlands plan, and others, so that we're all on the same page. And so that we're not, at the end of the day, fighting which development proposal or which regulation should happen. We're actually coming together and saying, this is our vision. We're all going to work together to make this work.
Wow.
And keep in mind,
I'm sorry, I wanted to say thank you so much, Tom and Paul. I'm actually the associate curator at the Lebanon Township Museum in New Hampton. And I'm so excited to hear all of these ways that our cultural institution could participate. We actually have pieces of the pipeline that and now I can't remember the name of the gas company, but they donated pieces of the pipeline to us to display at our museum. And we actually have the story of that pipeline as part of the interpretation we have in our museum. So listening to the vibrant communities idea has got my brain binging with ideas for New Hampton. So Tom, you're going to get an email from me, and thank you guys so much.
You know, Tom mentioned the river with trails and roadways. And think of this, the entire Musconetcong River is a national water trail. It is the only national water trail in New Jersey. And that's not just a title that somebody dropped on there. That is an earned honor because of the amount of ways to get into the river, access points and activities. So what better way for us to go out and have people get involved with grants and stuff when we have all these different assets that we're bringing to their attention and asking them to help improve. And going back to the culture again, they mentioned the Indian sign, the Lenape signs when we had the people down from Canada. We're now working with Chief Man from the Turtle Clan, and they are all part of. So we're taking history back a step. We're going back further than our history. We're incorporating their history, and even beyond their history. If you go to the MWA's headquarters, you have the Plenge site sign. That's going back 12,000 years before the Lenape. So I mean, we're covering our bases thoroughly. And I think that's important when MWA or anybody goes out for a grant and they realize all the different areas we're covering, we're earning our money. We're giving them an opportunity to let us showcase what they're interested in. And that's what I believe why they're so successful getting grants.
Yeah, speaking of which, just had a question come in. What is National Water Trail? Alan, I don't know if you could probably speak to that best. How did that designation come about, and what is it really recognizing?
Yeah, I could take both these questions that are in the chat here. So the first one, so just so folks know, I'm Alan Hunt. I'm the Director of Policy and Grants of the Musconetcong Watershed Association, but I also function as the river administrator. So I'm the interface between the Watershed Association, the National Park Service on the river, and facilitate the River Management Council. And that's the common title for the person in that role across these partnership rivers. Yeah, so we did have a segment of the river newly designated from the Hughesville Mill Dam base, and that dam's now gone, down to the Delaware River. And the question here is that there's a lot of private property on both sides. Are there any special challenges getting buy-in from the parties, and who could be stewards of the river? So there is some public access along that segment of the river. Along the village of Finesville on the Hunterdon County side, there's access upriver of Finesville and downriver. And it doesn't have a lot of access compared to the other parts of the river. That is certainly true. And one of the things that we can do as a partner is try to find land preservation opportunities for others to pursue. We've been trying to do that on the parcel that's across from the Hughesville Fire Department, which is a common access point, but is privately held. And then, so in the way you do that is you approach the landowner and see if they're willing to do land preservation, and then you arrange the meeting with, usually the state is interested in picking up riverfront parcels for public access. So that's the way you would approach getting river access there. And in terms of stewardship, there haven't been too many issues in that lower part of the river that I'm aware of, but if folks are aware of other stewardship issues, you can let us know. One thing that we did do was that there was a tree dam, which was just a blockage of a lot of trees in the river in Holland Township and Powhatan Township. And the private property owner had actually come to us. He walked in and he said, the river's trying to cut into my hay field. Can you do something about this blockage? And one of the partners on the River Management Council, North Jersey RC&D, said, oh, well, I could put you in touch with the Mosquito Control Commission, because if there's impounded waters, it could be a mosquito breeding ground, and they have special permission in our state rules to do stream cleanings. So sure enough, they went out, they found mosquitoes, and they were able to get permission to remove the blockage, and both counties worked together to do this, and it's free flowing through there. And the access was afforded through the private property owner, and they're much happier with things the way they are. So that was a good situation where we took care of this problem that was bugging people. And then the water trail is a national designation, so it's a little different. And the reason why we pursued this is the Musconetcong had tried to become a state water trail, and then the funding ran out of that program. But we'd made a state water guide for the trail. And we thought, well, if we're going to go through all this effort to update the guide, why don't we look at this national water trail thing? We looked at it, and it wasn't a whole lot of information beyond what we had. It took us like 2 days of work, and we submitted a water trail application. And because we already had a management plan, we already had a council, we already had a management structure, it sailed through. So the Park Service recommended we become a national water trail. And this is a designation by the Secretary of Interior under the National Recreational Trail Program. They have the authority to designate this. And it took a while for it to happen, but that happened in 2020. And it's a way to highlight what to see and do on the river, because the Wild and Scenic designation is really about protection and recognizing the resources, but doesn't necessarily direct people what to go and see and do. So there is a national water trail map. If you want to take a look at that too, I can drop that in the chat, and you can see where some of these others are.
So I had a question about increasing usage of the river, particularly since COVID, which is something that we've noticed. But unfortunately, that can also lead to garbage and maybe safety hazards of overcrowding and parking. So, I can say at least that the MWA, we have annual river cleanup where we at least try to control that on the back end. But at the same time, that's only once a year, and people are using the river all year round. Is there any way that this can be properly managed, or is this just a challenge with a partnership river where you have lots of different landowners?
So on this one, during COVID, we had started hearing from our board members and from members that, the river was being trashed, literally. So one of the things that we did was I went out to all the river access points I could find, and I hadn't been to them all. And this actually led to a mapping effort to identify all the public access points on the river. So as Paul indicated, we're not a very large river system. The whole watershed's 46 miles long, and of that, the river is 42 miles in length. We have 60 access points to the river, if not more, because I know I haven't counted all of them in the river and in the headwater lakes. So it's more than 1 per mile on average. And what we saw was that there were a couple hot spots in terms of usage, of inappropriate usage, and trash. And I actually made a survey, and I went out, and we then had one of our other staff go out and spot check some of them too. And what we saw was that the highest impacted sites were ones along county roads that were high visibility, like you see the road and the river. There were other sites completely unused. The trails were grown in with grass that was 4 feet high. We realized we had an information problem in many different dimensions here. So what the River Management Council did was we convened a meeting with our partners. We brought them into one of our River Management Council meetings. We brought in the State Park Service. We brought in the State Wildlife Management Area Regional Manager. We brought in the counties and the towns that own the access points. And we said, well, what issues are you guys having? And, through that, one of these sites that was high use, Point Mountain, Hunterdon County, we brainstormed some ideas, and we wound up putting a digital sign up indicating what the park rules were, that there's no swimming or picnicking there, and you need to take your trash. And later they put the signs up saying that too, and there's now permanent signs saying that. So they also gone out with law enforcement rangers too. But you can't keep them all there all the time. And that seemed to have addressed the problem. So we were able to call attention to it and then share approaches with how to manage the recreational resources. And then because people were overcrowding some spots, but underutilizing others, we said, well, why don't we make a watershed-wide map showing people where these access points are so people could spread out. You go to your favorite site, it's really busy, you want to go somewhere else? Well, here's a map that shows you where it is. These are all paid for by taxpayers, so we should know where these are. And we're also going to put on the cultural sites, right? So the historic districts, the historic bridges, the other parks, the hunting grounds, right? The boating areas. And, that's a project that we hope to have wrapped up, towards the end of this year. There'll be an online interactive map. It'll show you photos of the site so you can see what it looks like before you go, or could you even turn around a trailer there if you were bringing a kayak trailer? So that's something we're looking forward to. But because we have that framework and we have those relationships, we can address issues like this. So if there are hotspots that you know of, we've sometimes organized volunteers to go and address them later, or we've reported it and the land manager has taken care of it.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes left until we're at our scheduled stopping time. Gonna wrap up, I think, with just one final talking point, and certainly if people have any questions, they can add in the chat. But for Alan and Paul, to the extent that you can support this, just anything that people should know, wild and scenic related work or initiatives coming up in 2023, since we're kicking off this year.
Paul, do you want to talk about what you're looking forward to in this year, and I'll fill it in?
Sure. Closer to home, I am working on a new cooperative agreement with the Musconetcong Watershed Association. I'm already finished the first draft of that agreement. I'll be sending that on to MWA, and so I'm excited about that. We're gonna kick that off in August, so we'll have a new 5-year kind of lease on the arrangement that we have with this three-legged stool management model. So that's exciting. And also too, I'm involved with a study effort for the Brandywine Red Clay Creek, both of which are in Delaware, both of which extend into Pennsylvania. That effort is stalled right now because there isn't a study bill in Congress, although that may change soon. So that's something to look forward to. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Brandywine River in this meeting, but it's a really cool river, somewhat like the Musconetcong. Lots of cultural resources along the banks, up and down the Brandywine. And the Red Clay is an excellent trout fishing river in Delaware and even into Pennsylvania. So that's pretty exciting. That's kind of what's going on in at least in the immediate time frame of about a year for the Musconetcong folks and for wild and scenic rivers in the region.
So I'll add in there that some of the stuff that we have planned for this year, are really kind of leveraging the visibility the National Park Service affords for rivers like ours. So as Paul's mentioned, we've done some signage that looks and utilizes National Park Service styles. We're doing our first National Park Service brochure this year. So we're looking to get that finished up. So that'll look like any other national park, and it has a partnership section that talks about the partnership aspect. They'll have a map on the back showing you where the resources are. And it's going to talk about the cultural, historic, agricultural, the land-based resources and the aquatic and habitat resources. And, the idea for this talk series that we're doing this year is based around those parts of that brochure, which are the same as in the management plan. So this is the first in a series. Ryan will tell you a little bit about that when he wraps up. We also were, I mentioned, doing that interactive online map. We're also doing what's called an interpretive plan for the entire watershed. What are the best sites to tell the story of the watershed? Whether that's why the water quality is so great for trout, or why we have, those railroad piers standing at change water, but no railroad track, or whether it's talking about, the plunge site or current Native American uses of the watershed, right? So that'll be a great framework for us going forward to help us pick the best spots for signage or talks or tours in the future. One of the other projects that we're doing, and this is something Ryan and I get to work on, last year we had some National Park Foundation funding, which is accessible to us through the National Park Service relationship. And we're developing an educational trail along the river. And we're talking about many of the habitat components that make the river great. And it's a way that we can bring youth to the river, both in service, but in education. And it'll be something that we use with the Camp Muskie and also our Junior Ranger program. So that's something that we're going to be doing more of. We also have the National Park Service passport stamps. So if you want to come by the office, we've got those. We're going to be listed as a stamp site for the first time this year. So we'll see how that goes. That's something that Lebanon Township Museum is doing as well. And it's just really great to have this partnership as we go forward with the Park Service. And it's a great way to raise the visibility and highlight to people that we have this national level resource in our backyards, and it deserves attention and protection, but also appropriate use so people can enjoy it for many generations. So
yeah, I mean, you heard Paul at the beginning of the presentation. This is less than 1% of rivers in the U.S. have this designation, and here's my virtual background's messing it up, but here's the passport stamp for the Musconetcong. You come by our office in Asbury or the Lebanon Township Museum in New Hampton, and get your stamp. It doesn't have to be in one of these fancy booklets, but it's certainly a point of pride, and with that pride certainly comes a passion and I almost say responsibility to protect. So obviously being here tonight is part of that. So I'll say that what Alan referenced, we will have more of river talks this year, focusing on what makes the Musconetcong worthy of this designation. So this was just kind of the nuts and bolts of what does it mean that we are wild and scenic. But in the future, we'll be talking more about the river itself. So February and March, we have other types of river talks. We'll be talking about UN Sustainable Development Goals and what that means for building a sustainable community. March, we'll be talking about agriculture in the region. Where are we at now? What is the future of ag in Northwest New Jersey? But then in April, we'll be coming back and talking about the geology or the geography of the Musconetcong River Valley, going all the way back to how this landscape was formed and how that has informed and guided the wildlife and the development of people in this area. And throughout the year, we'll focus on some of these other subjects. One of the headings or topics in the MPS brochure is on land. So we'll be talking about how this land is used from an agricultural standpoint, historic standpoint, things like the Morris Canal, and also how the indigenous Lenape people have used in the past and are still using the land to this day. And then we'll also be talking about, of course, the water itself, and some of the features of the river. So hopefully this was a good experience for you. Hopefully the presentation and the discussion was helpful. And if you enjoyed this, we really hope to see you back here. And as Tom just put in the chat, we saw that we got this Asbury Mill fundraising dinner at Hawk Point in Washington. And that's to fund the restoration efforts of the Asbury Mill, which will be a future interpretive center right on the river in the future vibrant place of Asbury, New Jersey. So so much to talk about, so much to look forward to. So Beth, you want to add anything before we sign out here?
I would just like to say, how would someone sign up for that dinner?
For those of you who signed up to receive our email updates, we'll be sending out the official announcement and advertisement and sign up form. The food is wonderful. We always have good speakers, and you'll get to learn about this wonderful project that we've been putting in our blood, sweat, and tears on over the years.
So can people who don't get the newsletter sign up via the website?
Yes, that's right. So if you go to musconetcong.org, we have these 4 panels across the top with our, most events that are just at the forefront at this point. And when the sign up form for the mill dinner is up, you'll see it there. I can certainly assure you of that.
By any chance, is the river management plan online?
Yes, that is available on our website.
Oh, okay.
Let me just make sure. Didn't miss it. Oh, good. We have confirmation that someone got their passport stamped at the Lebanon Township Museum. Very good. And so with that, any other questions we have? It looks like the chat is very nice. Thank you for all your kind words and everybody for sticking in right to the very end. We went up to time, so that's a testament to how much there was to unpack and learn about here. So I tell you all to get home safely. Oh, we got a hand waving.
Goodbye.
Oh, gotcha. Just want to make sure I wasn't missing any final insights. So I tell you all to get home safely, but we're virtual. So I'll just say good night and thanks again.
Good night.
Good night.